Okay, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to Cultivated Live for Friday, October 17th. I am Jay Rosenthal. On 2 over is Jeremy Burke, my co-founder and our editor-in-chief. And in the middle is Andrew Graham from NuggMD. Although my wife and I have a funny story. We were in Spain and someone pronounced it Graham. So, Andrew, you're going to be Andrew Graham today as opposed to Andrew Graham as we start this conversation. We're going to talk about the work you guys did polling economic anxiety around cannabis for consumers. But before we do that, if I may, because both of you are in New York City, there was a big debate, which is making international news for some reason. People are very concerned with who's going to be the mayor of New York. And the question of cannabis came up. Can I play a little clip for you?
Please.
Here we go.
Have you ever purchased anything in a cannabis shop? And if so, what did you buy, Mr. Mamdani?
I have. I have purchased marijuana at a legal cannabis shop.
Okay. Mr. Cuomo?
No.
Mr. Sliwa?
When I was shot 5 times, I've had Crohn's disease. I did use medical marijuana. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So,
I feel for Curtis Sliwa, but he just cannot answer a question normally. That is...
For someone who's not from New York, Curtis Sliwa, we know him from like wearing the neighborhood watch, whatever it was called, like on the Jerry Springer show. I feel like that he's been around a long time.
Yeah, too long.
Why does Mamdani seem high in that one clip, Jeremy?
I'm not, I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
Interesting that it came up. Andrew, what is your take on that? Because it did, you live in New York City as well. Like, is this something people are talking about, or was it just a way to get a good clip for exactly the purposes we just did from the New York Post?
The latter, I would say. And, as far as the details of it, have them on and ask them, that would be the best way to get to the bottom of what exactly you meant. Yeah.
Yeah. I almost think it would have been awesome. And he's very good on the spot. Like he's an unbelievable candidate for sure. Love him or hate him. He's an unbelievable candidate. It would have been awesome if he said something like, I love shatter, or I'm an infused pre-roll guy, or like something, not top level, like, or even said, I love flower, I bought an eighth or something. Like it would have been amazing if he used some lingo, which he certainly knows. Like he's a man of the people.
I will say in a sort of more halfway intelligent comment than pleading the fifth, I do think the New York cannabis industry does want good representation in City Hall. It really matters for the regulatory environment. And look, Zoran did speak about basically deregulating halal carts and all the sort of Byzantine red tape that halal carts have to go through. It's a very similar story for cannabis operators in the city. And so, look, despite his very public stances on big business and capitalism, et cetera, I do think, the cannabis industry could find a pretty strong advocate in City Hall if he does win.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. So there you go. I will say this, and I mentioned it right when I introduced this segment, that there is a lot of anxiety among people not living in New York City about Mamdani becoming mayor. And some of that is economic anxiety. And I bring that up as a very clunky transition to what we wanted to talk to Andrew about today, which is the NuggMD Cultivated Economic Anxiety Index. Are cannabis consumers buying less, or will they buy less, or how do they feel about the economy, and has that impacted their cannabis purchases? Andrew, this is the Q3 one. We did one last quarter as well. What are we seeing among cannabis consumers and their economic anxiety?
Yeah, hell of a bridge there. Appreciate the question. So we're measuring how the economic anxiety of cannabis consumers is affecting spending in legal regulated markets. I think that point is important to get out there. When we developed this index, it was designed, as you know, to register pretty mild movements in sentiment over the course of time. And that's why I think it's most useful to look at how the numbers move quarter to quarter, as opposed to what each quarter is in isolation, right? So the headline today, what our 3Q index found, is that anxiety among this consumer group moved from moderate into the high category. That kind of makes the jump sound probably bigger than it really is in the real world, right? Last quarter, the anxiety meter, so-called, was on the high side of our moderate category, and now it's on the very low end of the high category. So basically, top lines have around 3% of the sample moving out of the spend a little bit more category, and around 5% of the sample moving into the spend much less category. So there's this slight movement from, I would say, mild optimism to pretty severe skepticism, but I wouldn't call that movement significant, right, as a share of the overall sample. It's just a nudge, albeit not in the direction we'd like to see it going.
And I don't think there's any way to tell if that is general anxiety about where everything's going specific to their cannabis purchases, but it probably trends with other macro issues as well. If you ask them about groceries the same way, or gum, right, or gasoline or heating oil, whatever that is, my sense is the way the U.S. is happening now, there is economic anxiety, period, and that certainly trickles down to cannabis purchasing as well. Maybe less for cannabis purchasing than other things, but it is interesting to see even that slight uptick, and we'll see in future quarters. Sort of, is it a trend line or is it a blip?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to think about how resilient cannabis is, kind of in the context of other consumer sectors, right? I personally put cannabis more in the wellness category than in the vice category, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in previous cycles, right, spending on wellness related items or goods is relatively resilient compared to other forms of spending. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And to your broader point, yeah, absolutely, our anxiety index kind of does align quite tightly with other measures of how consumers are feeling and what they think the economy is going to do to their own pocketbooks. And I'll also add that, like, right now, although those measurements are high kind of across the board, spending hasn't really dropped. Consumer spending is not going down, I don't believe, in any coherent, noticeable way. And so, will the anxiety hit consumer spending? And if it does, at what point does cannabis get hit by that downward trend is how I would think about it. Yeah.
We can ask Mamdani.
Yeah.
It'd be, yeah, sure. Great. You can get him on here and we'll ask him.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
That's his economic anxiety factor into his cannabis purchases.
Andrew, can you talk a little bit about how you see a difference in the polling data between self-identified Republicans and Democrats, and how the politics maps on to economic anxiety when it comes to cannabis purchases?
Yeah, sure. There's not a lot of what I would call meaningful and material signal there. There's nothing really in the crosstabs that really jumps out at you. The thing I would say that does jump out is when you kind of look at the data from a how do you vote demographic standpoint. Republicans actually grew slightly more optimistic on the economy. Republicans in our sample, I should clarify, Republicans who consume cannabis in state legal markets, their anxiety decreased, their optimism increased over the quarter, which is noticeable. It's not surprising, I wouldn't say, given who has the power nationally and so on. But it is in there in our data. It's certainly a data point.
Interesting. It is interesting when we first started talking about this as a product, if you will, or you came to us and said we'd like to do this type of research. I mean, I think it is super compelling. I don't see other people doing it. I wonder if it exists, and I don't know. So I'm asking you if you do know. Like, do similar industries or like industries or other industries, like does the beer category do deep dives with consumers to say, we think in the next quarter people are feeling this, we think this is going to happen?
Yeah, just from what I've experienced over the past year or so since we kind of set up and got this polling operation going, I do think it's unique to the cannabis space in that, there's this kind of instinct, I think, among state elected officials to look at cannabis taxes as, like, I don't want to say a windfall, but like as found money, right? And I don't think that other sectors that have, a federally coherent legal and regulatory framework have that same type of, variable. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're looking at this data and trying to figure out who it matters to the most, I think that audience is probably going to be electeds at states that have or are thinking about new cannabis excise taxes, right? Like, this has gone on in some of the legal states in recent memory. And I won't pretend to be an expert on how that legislation moves or what the mechanics of it is. But the bottom line is, it strikes me as pretty risky to look at the cannabis consumer base as kind of a perpetual source of capital to pay for stuff at the local level. I don't think that positive externality should be taxed in that way, and it just makes it into a really kind of tough sell.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly ask about that point. I mean, in some separate polling data you shared with us, found that cannabis consumers are actually pretty price sensitive, right? I think that the metric was, if a 4% tax increase, which is $2 on a $50 buy, may kick consumers to look at untaxed, unregulated sources of cannabis. And so in the context of Michigan raising cannabis taxes, I mean, I think doing this economic research is important for both policymakers and for businesses to figure out how to set the right price point, because we don't have a lot of information about that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and we put that poll you're referencing into market after California did the excise tax, which, again, no expert on the mechanics here, but I believe they rolled it back pretty quickly. I don't know if it's in force now, but I thought there was an effort to repeal it or roll it back, or however you say it. So that's when we put that poll into market, and the data that came back didn't surprise me. Now, look, the data says something around 51% of something like that of consumers say they would consider illicit sources of cannabis if taxes went up by that threshold. Again, it was 4%. I do not think that that's predictive of a bunch of people fleeing the regulated market right away. I think that when you put those questions into polls, what you're really asking is, how pissed off does this thing make you, right? If it's about taxes. And so it gives you signal on, price elasticity in this marketplace and so on. And to your point, Jeremy, I do think that the industry needs a lot more of that, just because, again, the federal, legality and regulation behind it and what have you is so incoherent.
Well, I think the other thing, just to drill down one level further, even to that part of the conversation Jeremy and you, Andrew, were just talking about, is that might be 51%. But of that 51%, it's the 10% or 20% of the consumers that buy 80% of the product. So like if those are the ones that are the least price sensitive, they have the most access to other sources of cannabis. They had a guy before, right, that has not generally gone away. Like, it's not just, okay, 51% might consider. It's like, some of those 100% of the great consumers might be in that 51%, and them leaving their local dispensary in their neighborhood, or 5 of them leaving, that's not nothing. That is like make or break it for most of these dispensaries, is those 10 or 20% of customers that buy all the cannabis, come in weekly, come in twice a week. Like, it's not, if the person who buys 3 times a year might go somewhere else, that's one thing. But if the person that goes every week to buy 30, 40, 50, $100 worth of product, like, those people are the industry can least likely to afford to lose. And the ones that are most price sensitive and have access to product somewhere else.
Yeah, and all of this is so new, right, to the consumer. Like, the idea that you can, I live in Brooklyn, right, and the idea that I can walk to my corner and go into a legal regulated shop and know exactly what I'm getting is just very new. I mean, this has only been kind of the state of play for a handful of years where I live, and so that's the audience that we poll, and I personally find a lot of responsibility and joy in getting to the bottom of how this group of people acts as a consumer base.
Us too.
Yeah.
No, it's super interesting for us. And I want to thank you, Andrew, and the NuggMD team for making this happen on a quarterly basis. You can find the details and updates and a write-up from Jeremy on our Cultivated.news. I usually point at my hat, but if I point at my hat now, it just means I'm cheering for the Jays.
Oh, Jays. Yeah.
Cultivated.news. You can find all the latest. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Get information from NuggMD as well. Jeremy, Andrew, thanks so much for being here. Good luck in the next, 3 weeks while the New York mayor's race takes center stage, not only in New York, but honestly, like, it's not on the front page today of our paper, but
It's close.
it's in there. Yeah. People love talking about the New York City mayor's race. So thank you both for being here, and we'll connect with you, Andrew, down the road.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
You got it. Thanks.
Thank you.